And the other side, I did judgment and said paragraph so and this point and read it out and I said, good point, this is totally against. And I went back and looked at that paragraph and that was dissenting. And I said, oh my God, I cannot believe this. And I came back next day, I mean, sharp as ever again and said, okay. Literally, if you ask me, let me define to you, there would be in my notes, if any, there would be a summary.
Yeah.
And that's a typical old style. I have a list of dates and a detailed list of dates. You can always make out a lawyer has won a case or lost a case. You see the lawyer's face when he comes out of the after his arguments, her arguments, and you will know, okay, today's been a bad day or today's been a good day. We are very full of emotion. That's the adrenaline and emotion.
Yeah.
And there is a time for everything. There is a time for enjoyment. There's a time for participation. There's a time of energy. So why are we rushing together that we must have everything today? If we intend to go on in this life, then we do need to engage in other things. A, B, we need to put less burden on ourselves, on the pressures. Those pressures will kill us. If not fully, then at least partially.
Yeah.
And that partial is not good. And today's lifestyle demands.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Vaarta. Today I am thrilled to be in conversation with a highly accomplished senior advocate, former Additional Solicitor General of India, Ms. Pinky Anand. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, just to kick it off, in which year did you start litigating?
You know, somebody told me you never give the number of years. You say X years because it doesn't describe. But having said that, there's really no secret in the world today. And I think one is so much out there that everybody knows how long you have been there. So 1981 is when I graduated from Harvard Law School. Did my master's from there. And I started with the law firm in US in the first instance. I was already registered here in India. In 1980 before I had gone because I had completed my LLB and those days no exams. So at the minute you completed your LLB, you were ready to go, so to say.
Yeah.
And then 81 I started with this law firm called Bingham, Dana and Gold. It was the third largest firm in Boston. I was the only Indian to get a job and that too in Boston.
Yeah.
New York sometimes. Those days India was a land of Maharajas and flying carpets for the Americans.
Yeah.
A very different story from today. 25, definitely a different story. So I worked there for a year and I took my job on. In fact, when they asked me for, how long you want a job, and I said, I only want to work for a year because I want the experience, but I want to go back to my country.
Yeah.
And I think that fervor never left me. The nationalism that went with my life, my friends, my family, my nation. So after I completed my 1 year, they in fact asked me, we would like you to continue. And I was tempted, very briefly. But then within like a day, I just kind of slept over it. I said, I think my first decision was the only decision.
Yeah.
So I walked back to India. I didn't walk back literally, obviously. But I came back to India and in the middle, I went to Europe. So I traveled around for about 6 months.
Oh.
I gallivanted between Cambridge and all parts of Europe. I did interrailing. I did Eurorailing. I took a rucksack on my back. So Geeta and I, and sometimes then later on my husband, also a friend, joined in. But basically we gallivanted all over Europe and then decided to finally call it a day after the 6 months, came back and started practice.
Did you start practicing together, all three of you?
Yes. Well, Geeta and I started practicing together and then because my husband had his own firm, but he also loosely joined it, but basically it was Geeta and me. And we were actually friends from school.
I see.
Right from Presentation Convent, the kindergarten types starting. Grew up in the same kind of families of friends. And in fact, Geeta's family is basically the inspiration of my going into law in a big way. Her father, Mr. K.K. Luthra, senior advocate, very well reputed criminal lawyer. And he showed the great path ahead. And seeing him was like an awakening at the best of times. Then he loved law. One thing about him was he loved law and he lived every part of it and lived it to the hilt. Not like the current generation which fears about spending more time on profession than on personal life. I think we and our generation has basically grown up in a way of spending the profession and personal life kind of linked into each other, intertwined. So you find the time for it, yet you don't find the time for it. Time is like, you're a slave to time as far as the profession is concerned. But yes, we started together and we continued on right up till the time I became a senior advocate, and the protocol barred that. But it was actually great fun.
Was it a firm setup?
It was a partnership.
Partnership.
We never really wanted to make it into a stricto sensu firm, and we were litigating. See, we were not really into. There's no real concept of corporate practice at that time. It really started after 90s, and that also
I
late
actually
90s.
wanted to ask you about that, because after you graduated, did you ever consider going into this corporate law firm kind of environment? Was it non-existent? Was it existent but just blooming? What was the situation?
Non-existent.
Non-existent.
Non-existent. See, the entire premise of the corporate world, so to say, not that companies didn't exist. You had company work. But the corporate work, the way we define it today, mergers, acquisitions, all of those kind of activities really started after 90s. It's when the international firms started coming in, companies started coming in, and you had nature of international nature, which led into this corporate field. So it was really non-existent for all purposes. I mean, you did documentations, you did contracts, you did commercial work. It's not that you didn't. But the corporate work, as in non-litigation, if I might specify, was really non-existent for most purposes, excepting for contracts.
And ma'am, would you tell us something about your college life? How were you as a student? And what all activities apart from academics did you take part in?
Everything under the sun.
Really?
Anything that I could do, I would do. And I think I grew up like that. So I engaged in almost every activity right from school, whether it was debating, whether it was playing, whether it was participating in social activities, whether it was and social as in social academic, I would almost put it at that. But basically singing, declamations, NSS, National Social Service, NCC.
Yeah.
Just every possible activity. I think that even Scottish dancing. I remember dancing at one point in St. Columbus as part. Our teachers taught us the Irish jig. Then, of course, as part of the school thing, it was a performance. Acted in plays in school. I'm not a very good actor, but nonetheless managed to pull off a few things as much as you can learn them. You can learn almost anything. That's my strong belief. So I used to play hockey in school. I joined a little late in the day, but I did. Otherwise, I used to head the PT, as we call the physical training programs. So broadly did everything, but our schooling was great. I mean, Presentation Convent is a school in Old Delhi, and I used to live in Old Delhi. It was actually just a hop and jump away from my house. My father was in the film business, so that on the side story. But the school actually had a very healthy being. So you had a big sense of discipline, you had a big sense of not wanting to really reach up right to the top in a way. I'm not talking about academics, I'm talking about life. So life was not all about either dressing or about concentrating on appearances, as some other institutions seem to believe in. And actually that's continued on for me pretty much throughout. So yes, you take care of yourself, but that's all you really need to do to be fairly good. And being in Old Delhi anyway is a great experience, because Old Delhi gives you a mix of everything. It's the old world charm as much as a charm. And I think the interaction with people is far more. And I think my playground days, my seeing vultures running up at the top, there's such good memories. There was a small church at the back. There was serenity, there was peace. I was a little rowdy. I wasn't exactly a very peaceful varieties, and sometimes would land up into trouble, but not serious trouble. But I did lead into a lot of leadership positions in the school and carried on with that in life in a general way. And I think that suited me well, because I think if you come up with a good mix, the only thing I sometimes regret is it was an all-girls school. I sincerely feel that, really speaking, this gender statement, if you talk about it today, it is good when you have an intermixing, because then you live in the real society. Otherwise, you have classifications. The minute you have classifications, I didn't suffer, by the way, I had no problem. But having said that, for my personal self, I do feel that having an intermix is a really great thing for everybody, because then you can deal with anybody, anywhere, and in any kind of situation, as I said.
Ma'am, because you went to DU, I have to ask if you ever participated in politics and
Yes, politics, yes.
And please tell us about that. What kind of activities did you take part in?
You don't have to go to DU to participate in politics. But having said that, you are right on your question. So I was just going to add that, and I'll tell you why. Because DU is the throb, the heartthrob of politics in its own way, and in our times even more so. Even today it is, but it is really the hub, and it has been the cradle for so many politicians who've come up. I mean, let's say Mr. Jaitley. just as a straight out answer, you take Ravi Shankar ji. Not that he was DU, but I'm just saying universities.
Yeah.
You actually start seeing the first, I mean, you see other political parties also. I'm not talking about only BJP, I'm saying any. But my first brush with politics came in actually in the university. And you're right, it was DU. Because earlier I was in LSR. Now LSR is a little removed from DU. It's little removed from the campus life. It is little removed from, to some extent, of the real life. So you would only interact with the real life when you came down to those 12 colleges which form the throb of, the hub of Delhi University. And law faculty itself is a great place. I think the Campus Law Center really made us human beings in every way. And I do believe this 3 years was very good, 3 plus 3. Because what happens is you already had experience, you had knowledge, and you had knowledge in general fields also. It wasn't confined to law. So I have my own preference for 3 plus 3.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of youngsters may not agree with me.
Do you see a difference in the youngsters that come today?
I feel very sorry for them in a sense. I'll tell you, it shouldn't sound patronizing. What I mean to say is we had fun in the 3 years. We had hard work, it's not that we didn't have. But at the same time, we saw the world on a different platform. Today's young kids are really struggling from the first year. When I have people coming to me for internships in the first year, I had people coming into me for internships for 10th class. I said, why do you want to start so early? Give yourself some time, because I do believe growth is so important. And to be a good lawyer, you need to have a good experience and a rich experience in life. And that means whether it is in economics, whether it's in psychology, whether it's in literature, whether it's in any subject. The point is that knowledge goes everywhere. Law is not confined to the legal texts or the legal statutes or to any other part of that legal fraternity, so to say. You really have to go beyond it. And that gives you the depth.
Yeah.
But that, maybe we'll basically talk about that a little later. But see, DU itself is, as I said, it has every flavor of politics that it does. So, I mean, I guess my engagement with politics came in also because I was a public speaker. I was a debater, and I was fortunate enough to be able to debate bilingually. Most people don't do that. They either debate in English or in Hindi. But thanks to the fact that I was able to succeed in a lot of debates and win a lot of prizes, on that threshold, I must tell you, one of the reasons I love winning prizes is because the first prize I got, which is a cup, my mother went and put it on the mantelpiece on the fireplace. And, it was a matter of pride.
Yeah.
And I think once you develop that pride, being happy with what you do, that really brings out the best in you, because then you want to achieve that target. Yeah. So identification of a good target is very good for you. So my mother was otherwise a very simple woman, and I couldn't believe it. And then later on, whenever they gave me cash prizes, I said, I don't want a cash prize, I want a cup. And I would literally go to that, though later I became used to taking cash prizes and was fortunate enough to earn enough to not rely upon money from home kind of thing. But debating itself proved to be a big thing for purposes of my being able to have a standing in the university. And I would go around all colleges all over, not only in the campus but outside. I also was a tennis player. So I started captaining the Delhi University and move around in the university as well as everywhere else. So, and the third feature I think which is important is because debating was also common to all other people who are equal-minded and similar-minded, so to say. So, whether it is Mr. Jaitley or whether you have Ramu Damodaran, or you had Rajat Sharma, you had Vijay Goyal. If you pick up any of these people who are all my contemporaries, give or take a few years here, there sometimes, but everybody was a debater. And that is what really gets you into the public fray. I'll tell you honestly, I think in India, we need more exposure on public speaking. I think youngsters must engage. One thing is private speaking, one is law. But public speaking is something that takes the fear out of you, that makes you understand, and also you tune on to people. You talk to people, you actually respond to them, you see what they want. So that brings out a very different side of you, so which is, I think, impressive in its own way. So I was asked to stand for Delhi University Students' Union elections. So initially I was asked to stand for the secretary, and there was never a woman secretary prior to me. And DUSU would have about 1.5 lakh students. And being in DUSU, incidentally, had its own yes minus. Because sometimes it is considered very good. But at the same time, you had times and such factions represented, in the sense, non-academic people. Let me put it in a better way. Fortunately, I almost stopped every course that I did in my college and all that. So I was in a slightly different league, and so did, I mean, there are other people, but generally speaking, the absolute academic varieties would not venture into politics. That's the normal trend of Delhi University and other universities too. So I was asked to stand for secretary by people like Rajat Sharma, Vijay Goyal, Vijay Jolly, Rajesh Oberoi, and they all came to me, and initially I hesitated, and they went back, and then I was persuaded by my friends and said, "Why aren't you thinking about this?" I said, "Okay, you're right. Why am I not?" So I called them back. I said, "Okay, I'm willing to look at it." But by that time, they'd already decided the post of the secretary, so they offered me joint secretary.
I see.
I took that, and I did win by the highest number of votes. It was a crazy time, but crazy but lovely time. I think I learned to engage even more in public life with public people, see what people are, and appreciate people at every level. And that is, I think, the hallmark of politics.
Yeah.
In politics, you really learn that, it's not because Shutanji is wearing such a beautiful jacket that he's the best guy in the world. He is a good guy. But there are other people who may not be wearing a similarly placed, well-stitched, smart jacket, and they would be equally good because they are good people, or they have good knowledge, or they have good experience, or they have something to contribute. So I think that engagement, you find that, and then you find different qualities in people. You find qualities in people which are of a different nature. So somebody is good at writing, let's say, that's one thing. Somebody is good at arguing. But somebody is good at dealing with people's troubles. Somebody is good at judging people. Somebody is good at the Vedas. I mean, there's so much knowledge around. And India, I think we revel in ourselves. The more I look into it, the more I revel. I mean, even talking about the Kumbh today, I'm just looking at it and seeing people's responses and how things are going, including the recent episode also. But look at the way people behave in India and really look forward and participate, so engaged. So I mean, the people are talking about, say, people are worried about going. I said, well, for a day or two, people might be. The third day, we'll be back to normal, and we'll all start engaging ourselves into this exercise. And you call it a holy exercise, you call it a spiritual exercise, you call it a natural exercise, you call it a scientific marvel. Call it what you may, they are all actually a mixture of everything. And we are so fortunate to have just everything available to us for the asking. And I think that public engagement, anyway, so I joined as the secretary. Again, I did win with the highest votes. I was the first woman secretary. And I might have stood for president, but then I left for Harvard.
I see.
I got the Inlaks fellowship. And I was the first to get an Inlaks into Harvard. Initially, they were only confining to UK.
I see.
So they agreed, and in fact, they thought I was better fitted for America than for UK, whatever that meant. I think there's some concept of conservatism with UK in comparison, or the stiff upper lip kind of thing, and the other American openness. Anyway, these are concepts that people have. But I had no regrets. I would have loved to have gone to Cambridge, but I got my bit in. I spent a little bit of time there. But I really enjoyed Harvard, and I think it opened every possible avenue. And again, that was a different exposure, because in India, even though the Campus Law Center, for example, or LSR, gave everything that it has to do, but I think we still need to work ourselves out of the system of education. Now, for example, just a statement, open book examination. Now, for the life of me, we never heard this concept in India. And for the constitution paper at Harvard, it's an open book examination. You thought you could open a book and write an answer. You actually can't. It's a misconception. It's a misnomer. Because you do need to know your subject. Where are you going to find an answer to a complicated proposition? Because it will be, again, for my thesis, my professor says, I said, I want a connect. That's the only time I talk to my supervisor. He said, well, read this book on so-and-so subject, or read this article, which was incidentally single line, 78-page answer. And I said, I just wanted one line to connect some concept that I was finding a difficulty with. But that's the way it is. So Harvard really teaches you to think and teaches you to analyze. And I think we can do with more and more of that activity, because the written text is there. What we really need is the in-depth knowledge. But having said that, as I said, I think the Campus Law Center is one of the best centers. It has a different system from the national law schools, of course. But it brings out the hardy part of you and makes you involved in activities in all ways that brings you forward. So after that, I went on. So I joined the national executive of BJP. I became the spokesperson for the party. I led the national legal team for BJP for 2 terms.
When was this, ma'am? What period?
This roughly 2012. And then I went on with various posts with the party. As I said, spokesperson was the most enjoyable part because it was a lot of media. So you're constantly interacting and constantly struggling sometimes with, finding the answers. And it was as good as law because you're looking for answers as to why you do what you do. And to engage also with other people who are beating you down. That's why I'm saying debating is very good for all this.
Yeah.
So the idea is to get something across. And I still remember in some programs when I appeared, somebody said, "You've done an excellent job." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Oh, because Arnab let you speak." I said, "I didn't think that was a great thing. I think you can speak if you have to speak." And then I had others who tell me, "Well, you're not as aggressive as you should be." And I said, "Why should I be aggressive? If I can get across my statement and if it is accepted, I would imagine credibility is probably the best thing that you can do. So don't need to speak more or louder. I do speak louder a lot. I mean, people will tell you that. Not that I don't. But I'm just saying as far as things go. But then thereafter I went on to, so I campaigned widely for the BJP throughout the country in very remote places. I've been to Bhagalpur, I've been to Kishangarh, I've been to Lucknow, I've been to Chhattisgarh, I've been to Kerala, anywhere. I mean, if you talk it, I've been throughout the country and I've had, as I said, real engagement. And I think lawyers became very important at one point because you really required lawyers to have the knowledge of nomination. See, yesteryears you didn't require much. The nomination form, it was not so complicated. But the minute the judgments came and the law came, you needed declarations and the consequences of declarations or running the elections. Of course, in our country, elections are the greatest exercise that can happen anywhere, and it's a mind-boggling exercise. So the whole country revels and the world revels, looking at India and the kind of voting patterns that we have. And of course, we bring out the best. I think it's remarkable. So elections, and then I became the Additional Solicitor General of India. So of course, I had to be with the government, which was a great thing, but at the same time, you can't remain in active politics.
In fact, I remember when I had started practice, at that time you were the Additional Solicitor General. So I practiced from 2017 until 21 with two senior advocates in the Supreme Court, and I kept seeing you very often and kept asking. I think you were one of the first people that I asked about that, there's a ASG who keeps being referred to as Miss Anand and she's representing the union, and then my seniors would have told me that it's Miss Pinky Anand. Then, ma'am, I just wanted to ask you about your initial few years as a litigator, because many people have many anxieties, and I know that in some other interviews you've also spoken about the kinds of anxieties that the youth of today harbor. I just want to know from you, what was your experience like? Who did you start off with? Did you start off with somebody as a chamber junior? Then when did you go independent? How did you decide that this is the right time for me to go independent? And how did you navigate your journey?
The answer, I could give the answer to your question in almost one word. There was no navigation. It kind of happened down the line. I wish I had been as decisive, so to say, that I took every step one at a time, envisaging the next step ahead and saying, okay, I'm going to climb up this ladder. But really speaking, in that sense, God has been kind and life has been kind. So it wasn't really a decision. One just took a decision as and when the occasion really came around. So it wasn't to say, for today I'm just going to head towards becoming a senior advocate and that's my only direction. I didn't even do that. But basically we started out, as I said, Geeta and I started together, and we both started as chamber juniors of Mr. Luthra, her father. It was only for 3 months, at which point we just decided to launch off on our own.
3 months?
Yes, and that was it. And in fact, I'll tell you, initially I did also investigated a few of the firms, including JBD and others, to say I would join them. But some of our well-wishers, in fact, they advised, don't do if you want to be a litigator. Because firm practice would take you away. Of course, please remember, everything that I said happened X years back. So, of course, the situations tremendously changed. But nonetheless, firm practice meant that you were really behind the scenes as much, not in the front. And I think I always wanted to be a litigator, so there was no question about it. But 3 months down the line, decided to launch off and got a couple of cases here, there. And it was not even that we decided that, I'm going to get this kind of people or develop this kind of clientele. This was not the manner in which The today's world goes like that, I know, and should maybe, and one might have done that and done even better than what one could have done, but that's life. So as I said, we just started out with this whole concept of doing. We enjoyed the work, we enjoyed the freedom, but I thought I would close office at 5 and go back home. I had this fancy vision. I will not work so many hours and I'll only work limited hours, but it is a fanciful dream. It went very quickly. But things just kept happening, and then one of our friends' husbands got us a retainer with the Birla Group of companies, and that really gave us the strength. I think retainers are the biggest thing that can happen.
I want to ask you about it, actually.
I know, I can imagine, because one is panel and one is retainer. Now, panels are very nice and you need them for a lot of credibility and they can be very good. But really, retainer is the ultimate, because you get a committed amount and you get committed work. I mean, the organization, whatever it might be, a company or government or PSU or whatever it might be, is committed to you with a retainer. Then they are coming to you. And of course, maybe some few people, it doesn't have to be a single retainer. In this case, in fact, it was the single retainer, but that was because it was a smaller section of companies. But that gives you the necessary comfort and the wherewithal, and it gives you diversity. So, I mean, if you ask me sometimes that, can you handle this kind of work? Let's say, can you handle tax? There's nothing in the world I haven't done. And I would not change that for anything in the world either. What is your expertise? Well, having done almost all fields in the last 40 odd years, the point remains that you are able to handle it because A, and of course by now you're being briefed. So somebody gives you the background, and B, you have developed the skill set that is necessary to actually take you down that road. And it's a long road at times. I mean, I've sat up at 4 o'clock at night and just looked at a brief and said, okay, I'm going to find the answer, come what may. But the direction was not a traveled one in the sense of a planned one. As I said, had I planned, and I could give you some episodes, but I'm afraid they'd be a little more public, which I may not want to some other time. But definitely, like, I have had some people in the family say, why could you plan life better for them? And I said, I didn't plan my own life in that sense. I mean, even Harvard was a dream. It came true. But it's not as if I only headed in that direction. I said, I'm not going to move away from there. But it's true that when I got other admissions, I said, no, I will go to Harvard only. And that's what I want to do. So, to that extent, I think the greatest thing that life has taught one is that if you try to achieve something, and you set a goal for it in whichever fashion, and you work hard at it, it is highly conceivable that you will get it. No guarantees in life, but that's why I always say, for example, now that Chief Justice Nagaratna will become the Chief Justice of India, at least every woman can think that I can become the Chief Justice. They may not, you can't. It will only be one Chief Justice in the country, and everybody can't, it shouldn't possibly be a woman also. But I'm saying it gives you that picture, that gives you that image, that gives you the strength, that gives you the confidence. So I think these are the ultimate challenges that get you across. But with cases and with retainers, you get that confidence, which gives you the necessary skill set in, as I said, diverse directions. To say, okay, I can do this. I just need a problem. I can deal with it because it is a problem. Lawyers buy or otherwise engage in people's problems as much as doctors engage in illnesses. So we do solve them. Because in India, still people don't come up at the earlier levels.
They don't.
I wish they did, and I very often grumble. Because I said, had you come earlier, but then they choose not to maybe put that extra penny and to spend into that process. But let's see, time will tell. The way everything is becoming so prohibitive, there will come a time when people will start encapsulating their choices within that space.
And ma'am, what about your first office? Where did you take that office? And you said you were not very picky about the work in the beginning.
Not at all.
So did you also not choose the forums? And did you go to all courts that your
Started from trial courts. Started from Tisazari. So we had, Gita's father had chambers in Tisazari, what we call the Tehsil building. I just went to Tisazari to address some election campaign recently amongst lawyers. And of course I was reminding of those times. But I think the trial courts anyway stand you in very good stead. So had chambers there which we utilize. Then again in the High Court, later on, Gita's father had a chamber which we utilized and later became Gita's and whatever, utilized that. And then we put up an office here in Nitibag. So down the line, it was basically in these directions. But fortunately, always had chambers to utilize. And I think chambers are a big strength for litigators. See, at the end of the day, how much time are we to spend? There was no online those days.
Yeah.
Online really is the onset of COVID and a little before that. And thanks to the vision of so many of our judges. And I think we did a brilliant job in online.
Yeah.
But before that, there wasn't. So you had to be around. So even today, if you have so many cases. So, for example, I was standing counsel for land building. So you're there, you're literally there after every 5 minutes, you're required to be in some court.
Yeah.
If not for a longer duration, whatever that might be, but you're there.
Yeah.
Similarly with ASG.
Yeah.
I mean, I had my chambers across the Supreme Court. I would literally not reach my chambers there. So chambers are there for the security of having a chambers and to have a place where you call your own, so to say.
Yeah.
But if you go to Tisazari, you will find tables and chairs, tied with chains available there, which is also enough. You need to belong.
Yeah.
I think that's a belonging phenomenon, but had good offices and very much enough to deal with what. So even chambers, one started using the office here at Niti Bagh when we found that chambers, we used to work late at night. The chambers would close by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. So at the end of the day, you needed to have something to function.
Correct.
So really, it's a necessity. And today's with computers and online systems, and soon you'll have the virtual world even in the air, I suppose. I don't know how much you'll require, but yes, of course, it's so important.
Yeah.
And I think just a place where you feel your own, you can think, you can, of course, address. And one has such huge conferences at times.
Yeah.
There are so many lawyers and so many people. So this is the next fight that is coming across. Not fight, I mean a conflict, let's say. Because people will sometimes say, can we just have online? Now, there are lots of times I've encouraged online. But there are a number of times now I don't want online. And it is, I'm looked askance at. My junior colleagues will say, why ma'am, or the junior counsels who want to be, why can't we do it? I said, look, I can do it, but I know the work will not be done. There are reasons behind it.
Yeah.
So you were looked on a little angrily also at times and said, I really don't care. Just on a lighter side, for example, one of the days I was having an online conference. This was during COVID time. So the briefing lawyer had not put on his camera. One of the initial days.
Yeah.
I said, why is your camera not on? And my junior said, ma'am, you can't do that. That is not done. I said, why is it not done? I mean, I want to see the person's face. I don't understand it. It has nothing to do with anything else, but it's a feeling.
Correct.
We've grown up with that human touch.
Yeah.
And much as I appreciate, but we all engage in online today, so it is very, very helpful at a lot of occasions, and there are times and times. But as I said, sometimes I want physical, and even for arguments.
Yeah.
I do feel that all said and done, online has a presence, but for any major controversial brief, you would need to be in court if you can. Can't, I mean, for example, I'm arguing about it in Nagaland High Court today, and I don't see myself getting there. It is a very controversial one also. But that's all right. So online is very acceptable, but practices change.
Yeah.
People change. And I think today's generation is so hungry on time. And I appreciate it. It's not that I don't. I'm just telling you the difference of thought and process and how we think in terms of the manner in which to act. So if I have a brief, I will do what I need to do to get it through. It doesn't matter to me what the time is, what my engagements are. A small episode, I remember I had this brief coming in at about 10 o'clock at night. Anyways, ASGs, you got briefs at 10, 11, 12, whatever time. And I gave the brief to my junior and said, okay, I'll come back. I'm going for a film. I went for the film, but I looked at one page of that brief before I went. And I said, this can't be done in the morning. I sold the tickets and I came back. So, I mean, you do realize your limitations. So, at times when you feel you can't, it's like when I was, for example, a spokesperson for the party. I was one of my juniors' wedding, very, very close junior, So, I couldn't reach for a wedding because suddenly there was a crisis. I don't want to, it doesn't matter what it was, but one of those crises. And I was hung on there, so I reached there when everybody is like, Doli ja rahi, and I'm reaching. So that happened, but I did reach. And that is the ultimate test that I think you stand through.
Yeah. And ma'am, you spoke about the importance of trial work. Could you shed some more light on it? Because I think there's a growing tendency of people also advising that it may not really be necessary for your practice. You can start off at an appellate level, be as good a lawyer. What's your view on it? Do you think trial work is essential, advised? In what ways does it benefit you as a lawyer?
See, I do think so. I don't see how you can get out of it. The arguing in appellate matter is comparatively easier. in its own way, lesser work. In its own way, it is some work which has already been created. The creation, the entire project of creation, the entire process of creation is in the trial courts. And I think that, so supposing I am arguing a matter on, let's say, of non-exercise of jurisdiction by the concerned court on a particular, let's say, section of law, let's say, for a moment, criminal law. I don't know what that process means in reality. I haven't engaged in it. I haven't seen the intricacies of it. Law is not only textbook knowledge. Law is not only standing up in court. Law is understanding the process and then knowing how to utilize it. That utilization you can only get in the trial court. You also have the maximum opportunity in trial court. I think any young lawyer who wants to start, please tell me if somebody joins the Supreme Court straight away. Of course, not as AOR, because you can't be that. You have to qualify for exam with experience. But if you stand as a lawyer and think I can argue, yes, if you want an adjournment, say, let's say, application reply, whatever that might be, sure you can. You can also argue because you're allowed to argue that. But you do not even know what's happened. It's like an artwork. Law is like an artwork. You're actually developing, so the strokes that go into it, the fine colors that go into it, the manner in which a trial is held, the manner in which it is formulated, what happens with the witness, how do you cross-examine a witness. I think the tallest order in all of law is cross-examination. I don't think there's anything tougher than that.
I see.
Because you have to think on your feet, and that is thinking which is only in the mind. It doesn't come from anywhere. It has to come from within you, and that is also based on your knowledge. I think that really tests you. See, everything else, honestly speaking, if we put in enough work, we'll have papers in front of us, we'll have textbooks in front of us. That's why I used to laugh sometimes in India when they used to say, you can't refer to the statutes. That should be exams. But I have the statutes in front of me.
Correct.
I need to know what they are.
Yeah.
But I don't need to know line by line and to actually memorize it. It's nice.
Yeah.
Some you can, but you can't really do that entire exercise.
That's thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I also wanted to ask you about your personal comparison of government work with your own private work, because you've had those phases on and off and on and off.
Yes.
And how do you compare the two tenures? And how would you say that government work has pluses and minuses and private work has pluses and minuses?
No, definitely you're right. Both have pluses and minuses, and they're a world apart. Absolutely a world apart. I mean, look at a client who comes to you through whatever briefing counsel, that's not the matter, but a client comes to you. For him or her, that case is their lifeline.
Yeah.
I mean, it has so much to lose and gain that they will do anything to get there, as in the sense of all energies and their lives depend on it. And that direct impact comes on you.
Yeah.
For the government, it is a far larger sphere. They are not engaged in, government is engaged in policy matters. Government, I mean, the stakes there are again on a different kind of threshold. I mean, sometimes when I would look at, for example, for a moment I leave government, private briefs. One of my first briefs in USA, when I was working there in America, was some $17 million. And I looked at the figures and I said, how many zeros, and I kind of figuring out there. They left that zeros out because I said, it doesn't matter. It's a principle of the thing. But private work, I think, has a very different timeline to it, a very different energy challenge to it, a very different demand to it. And the rise or fall, the failure or the winning, also has tremendous amount of impact on it because it's your reputation. So I think the pressures on you are tremendously high. And then between civil and criminal law, I think criminal law, the pressures are even higher.
Why?
Obviously, your liberty is at stake. What else is at stake? Nothing matters as much as your liberty. Nothing. No money. Okay, fine. Money, if you talk about crores and zillions and whatever, maybe it matters, but nothing matters as much as your liberty. I think that there the scales start falling down totally on your head. But government work, the difficulty is, I think, again, that you, not the difficulty, let me amend my statement. I think you face the greatest challenges with government because what you do is you're working for the nation. You're working on a policy framework. You're working on something that will not affect Shrutanjay and his colleague and his colleague. No, it goes way beyond. And the range starts shooting out ahead. And then you're just looking at the multitude of people. You're looking at issues which involve zillions of people. And I think that changes the complexion. It also talks about, gives you the opportunity to basically change the manner of thinking, the value system, even the morality at times. I mean, today's world, definitely morality also. I mean, I, for example, was party to the triple Talaq case. Now, I think that made so much difference, just the idea of arguing. I also argued for adultery not being deleted as a criminal offence. Didn't win, lost that case, by the way. But that's all right. But it was before the Constitution bench. I argued Khushboo's case for where defamation, and she was really, oh God, it was something else, bizarre. I never thought one would actually succeed in Supreme Court against all odds.
Today, it's the prescribed reading for freedom of speech.
It is. But you know, the shocking part about it is, if you read the High Court judgment, the same was a thesis on morality. And I was wondering why morality and this would get mixed up. But, you know, that is the trend of time. And that's the way people think. And today, if you see, let's see the UCC, which has come about in Uttarakhand. I mean, live-in relationships are formally recognized after the DV Act, the Domestic Violence Act. That's the first time that you have actually recognized it. But arguing for Khushboo was again amazing. That woman is tremendous. She has actually got so much energy and synergy that I could do anything for her in the sense of working for her. And she did come to court, incidentally. And I think that also makes a lot of difference, just being there. So that involvement in the whole process, and incidentally the number of debates that happened thereafter. So it's not only the judgment, it is so many comments that came around during the hearing. In fact, I looked for them later, and as I did with some other matters, and I found that they are not there in the judgment because they were just observations or something which was said in court. But I think as an ASG, the kind of impact that you made, I worked on medicines, I worked on pharma, I worked on various infrastructure projects, just anything. I worked on pensions, I worked on elderly support, I worked on children, I worked on rape laws, I worked on non-disclosures. I mean, I worked on the women's compensation scheme which came around, which we were party to. So I think that amount of exposure, you cannot get that in a private field because those are policy matters which have to be institutionally done. So I think, and that again across the length and breadth of the subjects, because as ESG, you're not limited to subjects. Of course you have a choice, but it's a so-called choice. So for example, with tax, I initially told, that time Mukul was the AG, and I said, I don't want to do tax. He said, you will do tax. I said, or he didn't say it as many words, a good friend also, but he said, I want you to do this. So I said, okay, we'll give it a chance. And I really enjoyed that tenure, which I did almost, at least 70% of my work was tax work for 1 year. And I did some of the most exciting cases and got some of the best judgments and realized that tax was a lot more law than I thought it was. But at the appellate stage. So that's what I mean about appellate stage. When you were asking, just going back to that, Tisazari is the foundation. The appellate courts are the final pictures. So, I mean, that's where the difference lies. And as I said, for youngsters, I would always recommend that start at the trial court for whatever period of time you think appropriate. But definitely follow through 1 or 2 trials, which you actually follow through right from zero to the last. What you learn there will stand you in good stead in the appellate stage, because then you know what should have happened, didn't happen. After all, that's what the challenge is about. But litigation is a very trying mistress. I think it doesn't give you any scope for life in any sense, and you definitely are answerable to the last. Every day is an exam. Every brief is an exam. By every day, I mean. So as many briefs as you have, it is an exam.
Have you ever felt that I finally got it?
No, never.
This is so heartening to hear, and I'm sure everybody in the audience will feel a lot of comfort after hearing this.
No, I'll tell you one thing about me, and that's a very bad feature I have about myself. Till the last minute, if you see any paper that I use, any paper, any iPad that I use, you will find corrections in the last. I'm one of those who keeps correcting, keeps imagining, keeps thinking. I will sometimes sleep at night. So like when I'm really exhausted over a brief, sometimes I really sleep at night and say, okay, I will wake up in the morning and see again some further way, something new development is to take place, some new argument has to be evolved. So I never feel I've got it right till the last, and I sometimes go into thinking, all right, which way to go? You know, that even that sometimes is a choice, which argument to take, which will really sell, as in will succeed. Sell is not the right word. Will succeed. So I mean, we are struggling against that. There's never a 100% right answer, particularly in the evolving fields that we come into today. And I think the youth of today is very lucky. We are into a time where we developed the maximum laws. I mean, the number of laws that have come around, the number of commercial laws that have come around, the number of mediation laws, so for example, just anything you pick up. So, and it's an IT, of course, is ever evolving and will continue to evolve today and tomorrow for as much time as we are there. So, you haven't seen a more, encouraging time and demanding time. So, as long as we are able to face that challenge and meet it, and also understand that there is a timeline to this. I mean, litigation field is not an overnight journey. It's a long journey. And it has to be developed in that fashion. You can short circuit it a bit, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've never tried it. But even if anybody thinks it can be short circuit only marginally, the process has to happen because you are riding on your reputation. And people are coming to you because of your reputation. I mean, some will come to you because they are friends and somebody who knows you and those kind of initial years that happen. But at the end of the day, you have to prove yourself. That's why I'm saying it's like a test, a competition where you're saying take an archery and saying, all right, I can hit right in the middle. And I'll be like Arjun and be able to succeed there and get it there. But at the end of the day, you have to do that. And therefore, it's a slow process. So you have to have the wherewithal to support you in the initial years. So that's the other trying part of it, because particularly even now, I mean, now things have changed a lot. But for example, for men or boys, whichever way, you do want to earn to make a living out of it so you can sustain yourself and family. So it's a real struggle up. So now of course there are choices. So you have litigation, you have GCs, you have corporate in-house counsels, you have other positions within corporate you can engage. And that is very encouraging because I think the potential of law is everlasting. So even say HR, so you really get into that field also. It really works well. So we didn't have so many choices. You had clear-cut choices. When litigation was really the only choice, and within litigation, the maximum you want to do civil and criminal, that also. Even today, by the way, only very few people are really specializing in a field. You will find the topmost people engaging almost in every kind of situation, in every kind of demand. And it is conceivable because they cleared, done it.
Another senior advocate very recently mentioned to me, if you're an advocate, you should be able to do everything.
You should. But you know what Ashok Sen used to say also, talking about trial courts. So there was this very famous saying about Ashok Sen. So he was asked to argue a matter before the magistrate, and he would happily go for the magistrate. But nonetheless, he was asked. So he says, would you argue before the magistrate? He said, if you pay me, I will go argue before a poll. I have no problem. I have to argue. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's my activity. And also remarkable lawyer. He's not like an ordinary person, but most remarkable. And I think the kind of energies people have as lawyers. I think one thing, God has been very kind in litigation. The adrenaline flow keeps you going. As you see, Touchwood lawyers seem to last for fairly long. And there's no retirement age. There's no other profession literally in the world which gives you that kind of facility that you don't retire. Of course, if you want to, that's another matter. You feel you are charged out or blacked out by the time you're done by 40. That's your choice. But at least the profession doesn't demand it. Mr. Jethmalani, Mr. K.K. Venugopal, Mr. Burli Bhandari, they take any number of people. We've seen everybody with us and working with us. And Solicitor Sarabji. I mean, I still remember he was my neighbor. So I still remember the days. And even when he got onto a wheelchair, he was still actively engaging in activities, including coming for my book release and said, I am here, Pinky. What is this?
How sweet. And ma'am, on hitting that arrow like Arjun, you spoke about ultimately having to ride on your reputation. That comes from preparing the brief well and delivering an argument in court. What are some tips that you usually give to your juniors? And I'm trying to steal some of that for the audience. But on reading a file, how would you read a file? Is it different for a civil matter, criminal matter, constitutional matter? How would you read a file, approach it, strategize, and then eventually sort of argue in court? I mean, many people say, the preparation time is so much and the arguing time is maybe 5 minutes in court. So let's start from Supreme Court and go backwards.
So if you're preparing for Supreme Court, you're right. Now I remember a friend accompanied me. She's a maths professor and accompanied me in Supreme Court. And she says, what do? You just go into court for 1 minute, you just argue something and then you suddenly walk out and you start running to the other court. I mean, what are you doing? I said, you know that 1 minute, what it means in terms of preparation. But really speaking, the first and the foremost, and it's very boring, I know at times, but it is really to know your brief inside out and to know your facts. The first and foremost part is to know exactly what happened, when it happened. Because we seem to believe in today's world, and I'll tell you the fallbacks. You know the facts, I'll come to the next fallback just shortly. You then go to, I personally would go to the statute, if any, and really on the statute. Third, I would go to the precedents, because my belief is that statutes themselves are fairly clear and the precedents or the judgments only help you reach there. The judgments becomes the toughest field for today's generation, because what happens is now we have a lot of these summaries available, and of course head notes we had for a long time, but nobody wants to go into a judgment to see what the background of that judgment was when you're using it in your favor. Now that's an unfortunate part, because I at least feel that, and I'm constantly grumbling on that score. If somebody hasn't read it, it's not that I'm a grumbler only, maybe I am, others will say so. But the point is, if you don't know the context in which a judgment was passed, and sometimes the judgment may deal exactly with that context, and sometimes the judgment may not. And sometimes it's just said as an arbiter. I'll tell you a particular incident. I was arguing a matter in Jharkhand High Court 20 years back. And the other side, when they were closing, I had already concluded my arguments, cited the judgment and said paragraph so-and-so and this point, and read it out, and I said, good God, this is totally against. And then the matter was to proceed the next day onwards. And this is Hero Oko's judgment. And I went back and Quixote's judgment. And I went back and looked at that paragraph, and that was dissenting. And I said, oh my God, I cannot believe this. And I came back next day, sharp as ever again, and said, okay. So, you have to put in that necessary effort to see it. If you, particularly in today's time, when you have judgments which are, you have the majority, you have the minority, you have the concurring, you also sometimes are literally struggling to find out what is the final part of it. And if we just think we can skip through, we can't. But I must say that we must start heading towards shorter judgments. As a matter of statement, I'm very happy with the Privy Council and federal courts and saying, okay, can't we come back to that? Not only because I'm lazy, I'm not, but everybody has some degree of patience, and if we keep it to the point in issue, it makes it much clearer for us. And I think the certainty of law demands that we engage in that practice. Again, there may be backgrounders, and I know that this is one thing I thought about America. America is verbose. The same sentence which somebody in England would say over, let's say, 10 words will be said in 40 words. And that's no offense meant to nobody, but this is the way things are. We are, of course, more English in our own way than in India than US. But this is the manner in which I think we do need to define ourselves. So, and ultimately, after all this process, as I said, we talked about 4 points. Then after all this, you really come down to the point of then working out what your points of issue are. And I think that's what Supreme Court, we all started that practice, and that's what we are following. So, literally, if you ask me, let me define to you, there would be, in my notes, if any, there would be a summary. And that's a typical old style English, pressy, and those things that we learned in school. I'd have a list of dates and a detailed list of dates going all the way down.
Sorry, when you say summary, it's your 2-line, 3-line summary of the issue.
Maybe 10 lines, yes. Broadly, what the case is about. You know, what happens is sometimes if we just start on the legal part of it and we don't know where we are heading towards or what happened to bring it there, you don't know how to deal with it. It's like we do that today, even in all arbitrations. I'm sitting as arbitrator in many matters. So I actually, let's say, give me the background before we start addressing some argument. I don't know what you're talking about. So let me first understand that this is the broad issue in hand, not the detailed answers. So summary, a list of dates which goes through every possible date that is required. And then finally, written submissions. Written note, call it, points of issue, call it what you like, but literally a 2-pager which culls down everything from what you have done. And then you actually look at, as an example, years back, I was working with Soli in some matter, Solicitor, and I was trying to argue this very fervently on 2 different propositions. And he turns around and says, Pinky, these are contradictory arguments. I said, yes, you are right. So why do you have to do right so desperately, literally? I said, right. And then we took one line. You have to be conscious of what you want to do, can do, and how far you can do. You can take incidentally, you can take alternative arguments. It's not, there's no forestalling, but you can't take one which defeats the other. Alternative is to say, all right, this view, if not this, maybe then the other. But a self-defeating kind of argument you can't take. And at the end of the day, again, as I said, there are times when one has made new propositions of law and made them good. And I've had times when I've started arguing something that's an arbitration matter in Supreme Court. And just before lunch, I made this point, and the judges said, Ms. Anand, is this what you're espousing? I said, yes, ma'am, this is what I'm espousing. And post lunch, I argued. I actually won on that point. And I was also just wondering whether I was at the right depth. But I did know, I took my argument through, I worked it through. And you must challenge yourself. Don't think you're always right. Don't think the other's always wrong. There is no such answer. I mean, the other side also. And the best thing is, again, to understand what the other side's argument is. I think that clue gives you it all. So sometimes it's best to start with what the other side is saying. Saying, all right, I'll meet this answer. But the other part of the arguments is also take your own case. This is my case. I can stand with this. Whatever you say, I will stand with this. And I do. I can.
And ma'am, you must have seen many situations when the judge happens to be fervently against you in some matter. And how do you, I know it's a very, very difficult question perhaps to answer because every situation must be different. But how do you even hold your ground in such a situation when the judge is very, very willing to even throw your file and say, there's nothing in this case. Please don't bring this case to me or something like that.
See, one has earned the reputation of saying literally that I can't throw the file back at any judge. But nearing that process, definitely one can fight it out and one does. So I really don't believe in taking no for an answer in that sense. See, there are times when you may not be correct. In a sense, you don't deserve to win necessarily, or the point is not good. And it is refuted on legitimate grounds. But there are times when something is being done which is not correct. And at least you don't think it's correct. And simply because either biases. See, judges are also human. There are biases, there are prejudices, which anybody may have. So if that is a situation, definitely one fights one way out. And one is never known that, again, some examples, one day one of my juniors says, ma'am, you were very aggressive in court today. I said, but I wasn't aggressive. I didn't say anything. I only said what the case was. She says, do you realize in which manner you said? I said, I don't know. Maybe I was a little over-aggressive. Didn't intend to, of course. That's another matter. But there are times when you just give up also and say, this is not going further. You tried it out. Tried once, you tried twice, you tried thrice. So, but you have to give up. And as senior counsels, again, our protocol does demand that we make a point if somebody is not agreeing for whatever the reason is. I have either a remedy on a higher court. And in fact, there are times when we'll say so. In fact, the judges say sometimes. Say, all right, you're making this point and we know that one of you will go to the higher court. So be it. If it's a higher court, it's a higher court. And if it's the highest court, so be it. It is also, you have to resign yourself to fate. But let me tell you, one is not indifferent. One does feel bothered. One is affected. You feel a good argument. And you can always make out a lawyer has won a case or lost a case. You see the lawyer's face when he comes out of the after his arguments, her arguments, and you will know, okay, today's been a bad day or today's been a good day. We are very full of emotion. That's the adrenaline and emotion.
And thank you so much, ma'am. I want to just highlight one quote that I saw from some other reportage of yours. It's about the youth of today, and you say you are rushing ahead as the youth of the world and want everything ASAP. It is not necessary to rush because the urgency creates a tension, a stress, a deviation from what your virtues might or should be. Could you tell us what you meant? And it's a very interesting quote, and I thought...
No, you're right. See, as I said, sometimes I keep worrying that, maybe somebody will not appreciate what I do say, but the reason I say it is the same context I spoke about the law school and the 5-year law school. My basic concept is life is not here for only today. Life is here, forget the past for a moment, though I believe you should correlate with that. But the present is here, and the present is a current one and a continuous one, and we have the future. And there is a time for everything. And I'm not talking about the Hindu way of 4 parts of life necessarily, but somewhere down there also. There is a time for enjoyment, there's a time for participation, there's a time of energy, and there is a time for achieving, and there's a time ultimately for, call it retirement, call it sannyas, call it what you like. So why are we rushing together that we must have everything today? Because it does. I mean, I'll tell you another different example. The ISB course. Now, I do believe, though it's nothing to do with law, it's a management course, but it's done in 1 year. I believe the kind of stress that the students go through, they achieve a lot. They are the best. I don't doubt that. But stress and lifestyle is something that we have to account for in our lives. It's not going to go away. If we cause ourselves so much tension to say, I must have it today, then what am I going to do tomorrow? A, and B, what about the effect on my health, my energies, my whatever I have, my thoughts. Third is, talk about a young child. A young child, when they used to walk to school, I used to walk to school, take a bus, to walk around to the school, you would actually see things, observe things, think in your mind. I need that mind to think. I need that mind to feel. I just can't have it all besotted with saying that I must have everything that somebody had. I'll give you an example. I was a little surprised when some youngsters had published a few books. I am not underestimating anybody. But I mean to say that you do need to have some experience to be able to do something. And that's what I meant about it creates tensions which they will work themselves out on you. It's like, ultimately investor, people who work in investments, let's say.
Yeah.
Basically, you'll find they burn out by the age of 40.
Yeah.
Do you want to burn out? What do you want to burn out for? Or people will say, no, I'll retire. No, retirement is another aspect. And a lot of my friends have retired in the world. And they keep saying, Pinky, why are you still working kind of thing? And I say, I don't know. I don't know how to do anything else and I will continue working.
Yeah.
But if we intend to go on in this life, then we do need to engage in other things. A. B. We need to put less burden on ourselves, on the pressures. Those pressures will kill us. If not fully, then at least partially.
Yeah.
And that partial is not good. And today's lifestyle demands, I mean, of course, talking about mental stress and lifestyle diseases and everything. For God's sakes, what will we have? That's the only pressure we'll have on ourselves. We can't. You'll see some very heavy profile industries. For example, the film world.
Yeah.
You kind of age very fast. You want to do that, what for? You do have, longevity is increased. We do have a longer lifespan, but we should have a healthy lifespan.
Yeah.
And with that healthy lifespan, hey, time here, what's the rush? I always feel stand out a bit, chill out a bit, and do what you can.
And in your early years as a litigator, were you always sort of more or less at peace with wherever you were, or did you also have some kind of anxieties? Maybe I'm not heading in the right direction.
नहीं, बहुत ज़्यादा anxiety नहीं थी. I'm surprised. I mean, whenever anybody asks me about the past, they say, that's what I'm saying, it wasn't targeted, so I didn't have any targets. Why should you feel sorry about what you've not achieved? I didn't have it. It was like I was happy, and I could see something always happening. So I was happier with that. Got credibility, got standing, got appreciation. So at the end of the day, it all just happened without you necessarily saying, this is my target and I'm achieving it. I did think I could do almost anything that I put myself out to. I do have that confidence in myself. And I do think it's important. We all must have the confidence in ourselves that if I want to achieve something, I can achieve it. There's nothing in the world that I can't achieve. To what levels and variations aside, but I can. Confidence is the most important part of the legal profession, but overconfidence is not the best thing.
How do you decide?
You can't. There's no decision. Everybody knows. Everybody actually knows. You just have to pause to think. That's why I mean, don't put so much tension that you're constantly thinking I'm right or you can be wrong, you can be right. You're not perfect. A human being was never meant to be perfect. I don't know what God had in mind, but definitely human beings are not perfect. I am not perfect. I don't even ever think in those lines. So why, if I'm over ambitious, if I'm overconfident, I should know it though. I think we should stop and pause to think what we are doing and why we are doing. And not also too much. Too much thought is not required. Right and wrong comes very easily on the surface.
And perhaps a connected question is, litigator will invariably see a lot of injustice.
Yes.
How do you sort of keep going and keep yourself detached from that? And
very difficult. Very difficult. You actually come out feeling as if, you've been stoned. You've been hit. It's like a blast furnace or anything like that. But at the same time, you do get used to the fact that you are not the only cog in the wheel. There's a whole system which is working. And why it is working, I mean, there is something wrong in society that does happen, and you can't rectify every wrong. But believe me, when you get something right, it is such happiness. So I think you go through phases, but you can't remove yourself. You can mildly detach yourself. Full detachment is almost impossible. I don't even attempt it. But I definitely keep trying to remind myself that I have done my best. As long as I have done my best, I have not done injustice. I have not, fouled up. I have not in any manner not done my job. I have not worked hard enough. I have not had my team work hard enough. Whatever it might be. If I feel that's true, then the worst part actually in this is, it's the processes of law which are the most tiresome. It's not the results. It's not the tangible results. So what really bothers you if you get a date which is like 3 months down the line and something is going to happen today which is going to affect somebody's happiness for whatever the reasons are. I mean, that is something you feel very helpless about at times. And so you try to work on the systems. As ASG, as government, one tried to work into lots of systems to reform, but we still have a lot to do. See, India has tremendously good laws. I think we've worked very hard on our laws. And most of them come out quite clean and really outstanding in the field of laws in the world. But the implementation, I think that process is something we need to work on. And I do believe that there's a lot of litigation in India. I think everybody wants to go up to the Supreme Court. Nothing just satisfies.
The government also.
Government included. See, government is a reason because everybody feels that it should have the implementer of the Supreme Court. in order so that they don't get into difficulty. That's a slightly different logic. But even private parties, companies, anybody, they just feel that, you need to get to the last stage, which somehow down the line we have to be able to get out of, because that would reduce so much pressure. And I mean, we are having alternative dispute resolution systems. We are having mediation come into being now. So let's see, but still the tears of litigation. I also think sometimes we are over obsessed with due process of law. Now that
Why do you
is
say
not a I mean, that statement may get me into trouble, but how does it matter? So due process, I'll tell you why. Because at every stage we have some appeal possible. Now somewhere down the line you have to be able to put a finality. I mean, how many tears should we put in? Because either you improve the systems so that everything can be decided in a fast track way within a defined time limit of, let's say, 6 months, 1 year, whatever that might be. If we can't do that, then definitely we have to pay attention to how many due process of law are we putting into place to justify to everybody that we are the best society in the world. We are a very good society, but maybe we need to curtail, to make ourselves better. We need to curtail the kind of rights we keep giving. So much as I espouse due process of law, and I do, but really sometimes I feel we must cut down on that. Yes.
And ma'am, just to sort of wrap up the interview, I want to ask you about some memorable cases. You've already spoken about a few, but any personal favorites that you can think of that I was a young counsel, I worked very hard and got the result? Any inspiring stories for the audience?
I mean, as I said, there's so many. You're right. Some of them I really spoke about, but let me just speak about one case that I, as a young counsel, as a middle level counsel. So, I mean, what excites me is if I can change the way the law is. What excites me is that the worst of situations get out of it. What excites me is even more is human interest, because I think there's nothing like human interest. So just one short story about a child that was adopted, and the child was left here in India and could not be taken by the adoptive mother to USA, where the child was to go, because of certain formalities not being complied with, and the fact that the child in the meantime had become overage. And I remember that case, and I really looked at it and I said, this child is adopted and she's actually sitting in the orphanage and at an age where she can't be adopted by anybody else, because she's already adopted A and B age. And the fact that she cannot head towards her parent who was struggling with spend time with her, who she'd had occasion to play with, to study with, etc., while the mother was here. So when I went to the court, my argument, and I think it was Justice Gogoi at that time, and I said, Lords, I don't know about anything, but I can't sleep at night. And I started my arguments with this, and I actually couldn't, because I just kept thinking of the fate of this child, which was held on. And anyway, down the line, opposed by a lot of NGOs, people fighting for Indian rights vis-a-vis American rights, and those kind of stories came in the middle also. But I finally succeeded. And when I actually got photographs of the child, who would become from a young girl, diffident girl here, to almost like a football player in US, where I got photographs with a dog and a nice garden and everything. See, I mean, it put so much happiness in my heart to say I was part of the story, that somebody's life, and one has made a difference to a few lives. And I think each of those stories really stands for a lot. I put some stories into my books. I chose to write. Again, I was asked to write not for lawyers as such, though I have written 2 texts for lawyers.
Why is that?
It was just because, today the audience is a craving audience. The society is very curious. And the Indian society, as much as Indian society, let me talk about, is actually very curious about what's happening in the legal field. So you know some part, you don't know some part. Plus, as I said, and I always say this, I think criminal law always makes a lot of interesting reading. So to know why the mind worked like that, and some of the stories we grew up with. I mean, for example, the Billa Ranga case, which happened during my university days. I mean, that left the thumb, the handprint, bloodied handprint there. Or you talked about Dr. Jain's murder, which happened in Defense Colony, which again was a famous case. So just various things in which I had participated or been around or done. With Khushboo's case, I mean, one has done that. One covered so many honor killing, Good Samaritan. But these stories are not, why I'm saying is they're not legal texts, because they are absolutely authentic. But they go way beyond what the law is. They go behind on the persona, on the psychology, on the thought, and why and what, and why society acted the way it did. So society and law and the interaction, which incidentally is one of the greatest interactions in our country. I think we've responded with the cause of time, and that's why we are where we are.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing that and everything else with us. We had a great time. I had a great time, and I'm sure everybody in the audience also did. Thank you so much. If you're still with us, do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And do drop us some comments to let us know what you'd like us to ask our future guests. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Adultery.